Good afternoon. It is afternoon. My name is Michelle Jordan, and I'm president of the League of Women Voters of Evanston. Welcome to the forum for candidates running in the upcoming election for City Council, the 1st and 3rd wards. City Council members serve a 4-year term. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization dedicated to promoting the active and informed participation of citizens in government. We sponsor these events as a service to the community. The League of Women Voters neither endorses nor opposes candidates for public office. I'd like to thank the city now for providing the space and the services for today's forum. Our moderator today is Gilda Carew. She has been a member of the League of Women Voters since 1976. She joined in Ocean County, New Jersey. She's been a member of the League of Women Voters of Arlington Heights, Mount Prospect, Buffalo Grove area since the early 1980s and has served as president and in several other positions. Gilda is the daughter of refugees from Estonia and is currently the deacon pastor of the First Estonian Evangelical Lutheran Church of Chicago. She is also a retired federal employee and attorney and served as a mediator for the Chicago Federal Executive Board. Gilda will review the forum rules and introduce the candidates and start the questioning. Let's get started.
Thank you, Michelle. Good afternoon to everyone, and hello to everyone watching on video. The forum rules were shared with all of the candidates who agreed to them, and they are posted. Some of the important parts to review are that the questions were solicited from the public by internet, and we did get submissions, and also the league looked at questions. A committee looked at the questions and screened them to make sure that they were appropriate and could be answered by all of the candidates. The candidates are seated in alphabetical order and not by ward. So we have 3 candidates for the 3rd ward and 2 candidates for the 1st ward. So please pay attention to when the candidates are speaking as to which one you might be voting for. In interest of time, we will not have opening statements. Each candidate will have up to 1.5 minutes to respond to all questions. And as a reminder to the candidates, you don't have to use 1.5 minutes. So if you're brief and want to answer it in 30 seconds, that's fine too. It just gives us a little more time for additional questions possibly. And the number of questions will depend on the time available, and then we will have about 10 minutes or so to wrap up. So, I'll stop the questioning and I'll let you know. And the candidate who will start the closing statement will be the candidate who is next in the rotation where we're doing the questions, so that everybody, the same person is not always answering 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, or 5th. And at this point, I would like to also say that we have a few rules for the audience. First of all, please put your cell phones on Do Not Disturb or turn them off, so we don't get interruptions, reminders, some business telling you they have a special going on and dings your phone. It's quite annoying. Then please try to keep quiet and stay seated. If you need to get up, that's okay, but we don't want yo-yo behavior. Again, it gets distracting. There's no flash photography and no photos of anyone in the audience. And we'd appreciate it if there would not be any interruptions, pro or con, for anything a candidate says, so that we can keep this flowing. So with that, I'd like to introduce the candidates. The first person, alphabetically, is Jennifer Gear, and she is running in the Ward 3. Then we have Stephen Hackney, who is running in Ward 1. We have Sean Isles, who is running in Ward 3. We have Claire Kelly, who is running in Ward 1, and John Kennedy in Ward 3. So if you, it alternates. So so it's 3-1-3-1-3. So try to keep that in mind when you're listening to the candidates. And with that, I'd like to begin asking the questions. Each candidate, again, will have up to 1.5 minutes to answer each question. So the first question will be answered first by Jennifer Gear. And the question is, what do you believe is the top challenge facing the city today and why?
I think the top challenge for the city is going to be fiscal responsibility in the face of a federal administration that doesn't want to help us reach our goals. So I think that taking a close look at what our priorities are for the budget, making sure that those priorities include protecting our environment, protecting our immigrant and marginalized communities is really important. And we need to have a plan that is nuanced and uses as many policy tools as we're able to levy to make sure that we're still affordable, that we're still sustainable, and that we're making progress on our progressive goals, especially when the presidential administration is not going to help us get there.
Thank you. Stephen Hackney.
Thank you, and thank you so much for having me here. I appreciate the League of Women Voters, and these forums are a very important part of our democracy. The most important challenge facing our city, I believe, right now are the D65 schools. The schools are a critical part of any value proposition for a suburb like Evanston, and it is top of mind and a top priority that we get our schools back on the right track. Right now, the school-aged elementary population in Evanston is down 20%, and we have got to figure out a way to turn that around. And I know that these are city council elections, and you might be thinking, what does this have to do with the Evanston City Council? And my pitch to you is that we need a whole of government response to the schools to make sure that we are able to get them on the right track. One of the problems faced by the schools has been fiscal discipline, and I can tell you that this is an important attribute of my candidacy. I'm a retired partner at Kirkland & Ellis. I spent decades litigating financial statements, balance sheets, valuations, and all the things that go into running an effective company or an effective city. And I will bring those types of talents to the City Council to make sure that the City Council does not reprise the problems faced by the school district. And this is important because the last 3 budgets unanimously approved have all been structural deficit spending by the city. So this is a key time for candidates like me. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Sean Isles.
I agree with Jennifer. I think our fiscal situation is the thing that's the most important facing the city right now. We're facing a $23 million structural deficit in the next budget. We are facing some serious legacy capital projects like what we're going to do with City Hall and what we're going to do with the fire and police headquarters. I'm concerned about maintaining a proper reserve fund, especially in the face of uncertainty at the federal level. So I have a few ideas about that, and I'm sure I'm going to get another chance to talk about it during the forum.
Thank you. Claire Kelly.
Thank you. Yes, fiscal accountability and fiscal discipline is extremely important on all levels, and I think we absolutely do need to work as a city with our financial, with the financial committees from District 65 and 202 work together to ensure fiscal discipline and responsibility. That's what ensures a better product for our residents. I also feel, we also have to look at the fiscal situation at the city. We have overspending every single year, and we need to seriously address that, and we need to start insisting on staying within budget. There's nothing wrong with that. We also have to address affordability in the city. That's also a very important issue, as well as our comprehensive plan. We need to move forward with a comprehensive plan that reflects the interests of our residents and our businesses, and that supports an inclusive and vibrant city. Affordability is absolutely an issue, and that's tied into our comprehensive plan, and that's tied into fiscal responsibility. So I would say those 3 things are tops on the agenda: fiscal responsibility, addressing affordability, and developing a comprehensive plan that creates a thriving and inclusive city. Thank you.
Thank you. John Kennedy.
So this is a city that really likes to do things. It likes to do things for the community. It likes to do things for each other. It wants to move toward being more green. It wants to envision how we're going to be as a city looking like in 2045. But to get to any of these attributes and strivings, you need to have a financial base. As somebody who started, raised money for, and ran 3 successful software businesses, you learn very quickly that manna doesn't come from the heavens, and that you have to be careful with every single dollar. And what I've seen of the city budget is terrible. I mean, this council takes a budget that the staff provides and immediately goes to the revenue side and says, we need more money. And I'm sorry, there's an expense side of that budget that can be looked at very carefully and prioritized as to what we really need. And, spending too much money on consultants, spending too much money on crazy projects that are, fiscally irresponsible has to come to a stop. Thank you.
Thank you. The second question will be answered first by candidate Hackney. The question is, the city has not raised property taxes for 2 years. What additional sources of revenue would you support? What cuts to current programs would you support to help balance the budget?
So there are 2 different things that we're going to need to do in order to address our fiscal situation. One of them is we're going to have to assess the fees that we charge for different things. So for example, if you look at Robert Crown, which I love, and I take my daughter Ren to all of the time, she's the 11-year-old sitting over there. Robert Crown is a wonderful facility. It cost somewhere around $70 million, including I think $40 million of public debt. Robert Crown is ticketed right now to lose almost $900,000 this year. And in my worldview, a state-of-the-art facility like that needs to, at a minimum, break even. Similarly, our beaches are going to run a $200,000 deficit this year. And I think we have to review these to see whether we can, at a minimum, get them to zero, if not do a little bit better with them, so that we can help with the burden that is coming for sure. The second thing that I want to talk to you all about that is critical is we need a master facilities plan. A master facilities plan is one that assesses all of the physical assets of the city, its buildings and its parks. We need that assessment of where they are in terms of required capital expenditures, and we need that assessment in terms of which ones are maybe not core to our operations, like this building. We should find ways to turn this building into housing, which we desperately need in the city, and use the money for other purposes with our government. And I think this is a clear point of contrast between me and many of the other candidates.
Candidate Isles.
Yes. So I think there's a number of things we can do to help with the budget. One of the most important things we can do is expand the tax base. So I'm a big fan of transit-adjacent development, especially downtown. It's a way for us to increase the number of units, expand the tax base, and revitalize downtown. We have office workers that aren't coming back after the pandemic, and we need to increase the number of residents that are downtown. The places that are doing well are places where people live, places like Central Street and Andersonville. And so we need to deal with that. I have some other ideas of things that we can do to help fill our structural deficit, things like a vacancy storefront ordinance. One of the things that I think has been successful was the South End Community Center. We bought that for $2.5 million, and it's projected to have $600,000 in revenue this year. Part of that's because it has an electric commercial kitchen, part of it's a bakery. So I'm wondering, why doesn't Robert Crown generate revenue in the same way? Why don't we get food there? Why can't we get, I grew up in Canada. I've never been to a hockey rink that doesn't serve food. I don't expect poutine, but I expect to be able to get things there. I expect that if I have a party there for my kids, that we can buy food and rent space there. It should be generating revenue. And I'd like to talk about the
Thank
City
you.
Hall lease, but I'll do that next time.
Thank you. Candidate Kelly?
Thank you. So I'm very proud of much of the work I've done during this term to generate revenue and to bring more residents into the city, including getting our lakefront cafe open. I think creating more accessibility to our lakefront where we're using it for things like that, and it should be open regularly next month. And I do want to say we did, which I think was a very excellent move, we hired a food coordinator for the city, so they are now selling food at Robert Crown. I also agree that there are issues with Robert Crown and the maintenance of those ice rinks. I have concerns about that. I'm also very excited about that ushering in the folk festival along the lakefront. I think these sort of activities are what are really going to bring in and generate revenue, as well as tending to our downtown, really investing in our small businesses and standing behind them. I'm proud of the work I did to create grants to support our small businesses, the work I did to reduce the liquor license fees for our small businesses, and for creating free parking during the holidays. All of these are efforts that bring people in, that make people want to shop downtown, that increase our sales revenue. I'm also very proud I'm the lead sponsor on a responsible bidders ordinance. We have exorbitant consulting fees. We contract frequently with change orders that are sometimes 30-40%. A responsible bidders ordinance will ensure that we actually look at the bids before they come in, look at how many change orders they've had, to what percent, if they've met the timeline. So these are all, there's myriad many items that we all need to do in terms of really increasing
Thank you.
revenue and decreasing expenses. Thank you.
Candidate Kennedy?
Well, with regard to a tax increase, I don't believe we have a structural deficit. I believe we have a structural problem with staff thinking that it's Christmas and we're going to throw everything into this budget and let the council work through as to what needs to be done and prioritize it. Well, and that was told to me by a staff member. So the problem is the council up to now has not taken the hard work of going line by line through the budget. And the most important thing is it shouldn't necessarily be the council. The city manager should be delivering a balanced budget, one that provides excess funds for the kinds of things we want and need to do for the community. I believe, a city has to provide for its basic infrastructure, but and safety of the residents. But from there, it's a prioritization issue. And, sometimes you have to, extend out time to get something done and have goals for next year. And I'm bringing those skills that I've developed over the years to this council to try to achieve that.
Thank you. Candidate Gear?
Yeah, I am very opposed to raising the city's property tax levy. I think that poses an affordable housing problem, and I'm excited about the idea of expanding housing options. But I think that when we do that, we need to hold developers accountable for building housing that is 2-3 bedroom units so that families can live in Evanston, so we can support the dropping enrollment in our schools. And I also think that when new developments go in, the city should expect those developments to pay the property tax that they promised the city when they proposed the development. I'm a big fan of focusing on our economic development. I have been advocating for a vacancy tax on empty storefronts that have been open for 2 or more years so that we incentivize the right kind of behavior of getting businesses in, supporting our sales tax base. And I also want to improve our public transportation. I've suggested a progressive wheel tax that would go into a transit improvement fund so that more people of more economic means can come into Evanston easily and spend money here and get around without needing to rely on cars. I think an important part of generating revenue is also enforcing our landlord-tenant ordinance and issuing fines for repeat offenders. For cuts, I agree that we spend a lot of money on consultants that then produce a product that the public dislikes. So I'd like to see city council members take a much more active role in doing the public engagement on the front end so that we are not wasting time in the budget on trying to fix a project that the public dislikes.
Thank you. The next question will be answered first by candidate Isles. The question is, Envision 2045 makes many recommendations, including zoning changes. What changes to zoning do you think should be made to address the need to increase the housing stock in Evanston?
Like I said earlier, I'm a big fan of transit-adjacent development. I want to increase the housing stock to put a downward pressure on price and rents. I want to bring consumers to the corridors where we need them, and I want to grow the tax base, which is something that will help both the city and the schools. It's one of the things that the city can do to directly help schools by growing their budget as well. The third ward is already very dense with a wide variety of housing options. So I'm focused more on downtown as a way that a development can bring consumers where we need them and help relieve some of the economic stagnation that we have downtown. As far as things that I don't like about Envision 2045 on the development front, I think 4 flats is one step too far. And the reason I think that is that it doesn't move the needle on development. In Minneapolis, only 1% in the last 5-6 years has been the development of duplexes and triplexes. 87% has been 20 units or more. So I think that's where we can make the difference. In the third ward, there is a historical preservation overlay that takes precedence over the zoning code. So there isn't much danger of that happening in the third ward.
Thank you. Candidate Kelly.
I'm sorry, would you mind repeating the question?
Envision 2045 makes many recommendations, including zoning changes. What changes to zoning do you think should be made to address the need to increase the housing stock in Evanston?
Thank you. Well, for starters, we really need to have a detailed, tailored look at our city, at what housing stock is available. We need to look at what we have in terms of affordable housing. We need to look at, how people are living, whether they're living beyond their means in just a very small space or a larger space. We haven't done any of these detailed studies on our low-income population and on affordable housing. So we need to make a determination as to just by what percentage we need to increase our affordable housing. I think we all agree that Evanston isn't affordable. I will say right now that the carpet zoning of eliminating single-family home neighborhoods is absolutely not the solution. Or, for example, tall buildings of unlimited height downtown is not the solution to attracting and retaining small businesses, or businesses, period. What we need to do is look at this on a block-by-block basis. And I don't have anything against increasing density, but that should be done block by block, and we should consider spacing also, as opposed to just blanket. And spacing is where you allow, for example, so much density per 600 feet or whatever a block measures, but not just the blanket. This carpet zoning does not answer the question of increasing affordability for our workforce, too, that needs to be here. Our inclusionary housing ordinance that was recently passed is a shame and embarrassment. We now mandate 0% affordable housing on new developments. I mean, that to me is a scandal for a progressive city like Evanston.
Thank you. Candidate Kennedy.
So the city has, I think it's 25 years now, been living with a zoning environment where it's kind of held together with masking tape. It needs to be reworked, but I don't think radically. I think Envision Evanston 2045, the first edition, in other words, the one that came out initially, was a developer grab. Let's make all R1 up to 4 units. Let's go to 100-foot tall buildings up and down Chicago, the corridor. And luckily that, I think, has stimulated a lot of pushback. And now they're rethinking it. I think the current Envision is kind of like, draft number 1 at this point. Now, let's look at affordable housing. I agree with Claire that you need to, if you're going to be, truly, if we're going to hang in on our word for wanting this, we've got to pass legislation that mandates, in my belief, up to 20% affordable. But more importantly, affordable for whom? There's a lot of affordable housing right now Wesley Apartments was an example of one where the city took their eye off the ball. And what we've got to do is maintain the truly affordable for the people that really need that kind of housing. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Gear?
I agree that we need to simplify and streamline our zoning code because it's very complicated and convoluted to understand right now. I think that for affordable housing, although that's not necessarily baked into the zoning code, we should raise our affordable housing requirement. We should add protections for renters. We should remove the ability to pay the city to avoid building affordable units on site. And we should require a certain amount of 2- and 3-bedroom units, just like we require affordable housing. I am excited about transit-oriented development, but like I said, we need to improve our public transit in order to make that a reality. But our zoning changes should allow for more double houses and duplexes, more accessory dwelling units, and rehabs of large buildings to become multiple units if they'd like to. We don't necessarily need to build more buildings in order to add density, and I think allowing for those rehabs will be helpful. We should protect our historic buildings and the green landscape that goes alongside that. In the third ward, we've been talking a lot about sunlight, which is important for people who want to be able to access solar energy on their homes, for people who want to preserve the tree canopy and otherwise enjoy sunlight. So I think the conversation around building heights is an important one that we've been having, and I don't support having 100-foot buildings on Chicago Avenue. But I think we should also be ambitious about creating new transit corridors. It's outside the third ward, but Ridge and Dodge are also big areas for a lot of transit, and I think that if our zoning code adds those as good places for development, then that can make the city a bit more circular.
Thank you. Candidate Hackney.
What I have loved about Envision Evanston is it's been an opportunity for all of us to think about what is our vision for this city in the long term. I know I've been spending a lot of time thinking about that, and I've decided that my vision for Evanston has 2 essential elements. We must retain our diverse nature as a city. It's why I moved to this city. It is at the core of who we are. And second, we must be a place that young families can afford to live in. And right now, I am worried that we are losing both of those things. If we're going to get to my vision of Evanston, and I hope that you share that, we need 3 things. We need a downtown that is vibrant and that people want to go to. We need good schools, and we need housing that people can afford to buy. And the 2 parts of the zoning code that I think are going to help the most with this are the parts that facilitate transit-oriented development on the one hand, and the parts that will add the missing middle to our single-family zoning parts of the city on the other. Transit-oriented development is brilliant when it comes to economic development, broadening our tax base, and renewing our downtown. And what I'd like to do with single-family is why I think going up to 4 units is too much. Can we legalize duplexes? I love duplexes. There are a ton of them in the city. They're part of the core of who we are. I think it's a way to find the missing middle, bring those families back to our city.
Thank you. Thank you. The next question will be answered first by candidate Kelly. The question is, many city properties, including fire stations, the police station, and the civic center, are in need of immense renovation or new buildings. What do you see as the best way to address these critical needs and avoid similar situations in the future?
Thank you. So the best way to address the issues of our buildings that are in desperate need of upgrades and maintenance really involves, first of all, maintaining them. I don't think in any instance we should be moving out of a building because of the city's failure to maintain and properly upgrade a building. We need to have 10-year projections on what's needed in terms of maintenance and upgrades, which we haven't done. I've been asking for that, so I hope to see that soon so that we can really project what we're going to need financially. I think we have to do a better and accurate assessment, frankly, of what's needed here in the Civic Center in terms of rehab. I don't think we need a full gut rehab. I'm not going to, weigh in now whether we leave or go, but we need accurate information on all of these facilities. To say that we need a full gut rehab of this is inaccurate, and to project, astronomical numbers like $90 million when in fact we don't need to do every square inch is not presenting the information that we need. We need to have the numbers for the police station. We need to look also at there's a parking lot behind the police station. We need to have all possibilities presented to the residents and publicly vetted, not vetted behind, not discussed behind closed doors and then these decisions made, but accurate numbers brought to us so as residents, we can really decide, what do we want to do? Do we want to spend more to build a new civic center? Do we want to spend more to rent a building downtown? Under no circumstances, none, did it make sense in no world to sign a lease for 15 years
Thank you.
for the civic center.
Thank you. Candidate Kennedy.
So we've talked a lot about the financial structure of the city and how we need to take more care with the precious resources we have. What we've seen with regard to maintaining these buildings is abysmal. And it's the city lacks the discipline to do the maintenance that was required. They also lack the creativity to look at how a building can be better used. For example, this building could have a daycare center, could have a cafe, could have other nonprofits occupying sections of the building like the DMV does, and is quite popular, and it becomes a civic center again, not a city hall, 3 floors up in a high-rise downtown. And then you got to get proper estimates on what it costs. This building, I was able to, with Alderman Kelly, we brought in a contractor. He toured the building, gave an estimate of 20 to 25 million. After historic tax credits, it comes down to 17. Those numbers are not being presented. They should be presented by the city to the council, and the city has refused to go down that route. That's got to change.
Thank you. Candidate Gear.
I think that for all buildings, we should diligently gather information, set out a timeline, and then make a decision within that timeline. I would hate for the city to hold on to old depreciating assets or vacant buildings, putting more and more resources at risk. But I think that we should also listen when different parts of the city are asking for more help maintaining buildings. I know that the library building has been underinvested in recently, and that we need to honor those requests. I think that it would be helpful if the city more widely circulated requests for proposals, but also if we did the public engagement up front before developing a request for proposal and putting it out. What I've heard from a lot of developers is that they're afraid to work in Evanston. So I do think some of the delays that come with projects is harming our ability to get competitive bids for maintaining and rehabbing our buildings. So I want to improve that process, win back the trust of some of the business community, and see if we get better deals going from there. That's why I believe in having more public engagement up front rather than letting it delay a project once it has been approved.
Thank you. Candidate Hackney.
So you may recall at the beginning of my remarks, I talked about the need for a master facilities plan. Okay, we have to start there. So the master facilities plan is a catalog. It's a 360 review of all of our assets and their capital needs. So parks, buildings, the lakefront, we're flying blind right now. We don't know what we don't know, and so we start with information and knowledge. That's where the analysis must begin. Now, once you have that information, then we're going to have to start making the hard choices, because governing is choosing. And that means drawing a circle around the assets that are core to our city operations, our municipal operations, and also drawing a circle around the assets that are non-core, especially if they're assets that can be used to provide housing, which we are desperately in need of in this city. Now, the second thing I would put with the master facilities plan, I think we need to start doing 5-year projections when it comes to our budgeting, because we need to integrate the capital improvements that we'll have to make and how much they're going to cost into a longer budgeting cycle than just 1 year. We can't go 1 year to 1 year to 1 year without knowing what are our capital expenditures over the next 5 or 10 years and how are we going to pay for them. So you got to start with analysis and go from there.
Thank you. Candidate Isles.
It's been a long time since I talked. I wanted to clarify something about the last question. I'm against the 4 flats, but pro duplex and existing housing. As far as the capital plan, I think we need a proactive capital plan that makes systemic investments over time so that we have sustainable stewardship of city assets. I did that for the 3 terms I was on the library board. We had an engineer come out and assess the building, and each year we did maintenance on a certain system. These systems have a predictable lifespan. I'd also like to talk about the city lease. I do think that that buys us 15 years. And I think we should make a decision based on prioritizing what we need most and not nostalgia. And so bringing 200 staff downtown, having a 15-year lease where it lines up with when our pensions are fully vested in 2040, and then we can take a deep breath and go, okay, is this serving our needs or do we need to build a new city hall? I think the current city hall should be adapted and reused for housing. I think there's, $2.3 million a year is a fixed cost. It's something predictable. There's a reason why Fortune 500 companies don't often own the buildings that they live in. It's cheaper to lease. And that should be our priority for right now while we can focus on other capital needs.
Thank you. The next question will be answered first by candidate Kennedy. The question is, what is your understanding of the level of housing cost burden in your ward versus that in the city as a whole? What do you think the city should do to increase the supply of affordable housing? And how do you feel that sites for such housing should be selected?
Well, the citywide, first off, I've seen estimates of upwards of 40% citywide to be burdened from a rent point of view. Severely burdened is, I think, in the 20-25% range. In the 3rd ward, I don't think we're anywhere near those numbers. I haven't seen the data on that. But with regard to, making rents affordable, because that's what it really implies, it's really, the city needs to be working with the large landlords to identify where we can hold the line on rents so that people are not vacating and not burdened. But it's an economic issue that is, we're stuck with from a capitalization, or from a capital structure that we used. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Gear?
Yeah, I appreciate that John brought up that across the city, almost half of renting households are considered housing cost burdened, compared to about a quarter of owner-occupied units. So I think when we're talking about housing cost burden, we really do need to emphasize protections for renters. I am all in favor of adding to the housing supply. I think that is a good thing. But I do want to talk about expanding our rental registrations. The city's rental registrations don't ask whether or not a unit is occupied or how much it goes for. That's important data that we need in order to track affordable housing. I think we should also have a right of first refusal for people who rent a unit that comes onto the market. They should have some time to decide if they'd like to convert that into home ownership rather than being bought out or potentially displaced. I mentioned wanting to enforce our landlord-tenant ordinance. I think that is potentially a source of revenue for the city. I think we should also be keeping a database of large property managers who repeatedly violate such an ordinance. In the 3rd ward specifically, I think we do have a lot more stratification between people who are cost burdened versus not. I'm concerned that the Healthy Buildings Ordinance really targets some of the older buildings that are rent specific in our ward, and I worry that without having higher standards for more types of buildings across the city, that we're targeting people who aren't legal affordable housing, but rather take advantage of natural affordable housing. So I'd like to rework that as well to make sure it doesn't displace people.
Thank you. Thank you. Candidate Hackney?
Yeah, so I want to start with my understanding of the citywide data, which is shocking. So just process this for a second. 26% of renters in Evanston are severely cost burdened, which under federal regulatory guidelines means that they pay more than 50% of their income towards rent. If we are going to retain one of my 2 visions for the city, our diversity, our socioeconomic and racial diversity, we have got to address the issue of severe cost burden. There are two ways that we do that. One of them is through our inclusionary housing ordinance, which is critical. Now, one of the differences between my opponent and my opponent voted against this despite the fact that all other 8 members of that city council voted for it. And there's a reason for that, and that's because city staff supports the idea that there should be penalties that developers can pay into our affordable housing fund. Now, why would city staff be willing to let the developers to pay their way out? Well, here's the answer. The on-site units that you build are only affordable for 30 years. The money that goes into our affordable housing fund is money that we can use to build affordable housing in perpetuity. This is a critical distinction between my opponent and I, and it's a reason that I supported the affordable housing, inclusionary housing ordinance, and it's something that we need to keep top of mind. I know it's not as big a problem in the first ward as it is in the city, but that nonetheless means that it's still an important issue for us to address. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Isles?
Yeah, I share Jennifer's concern in the third ward that, naturally occurring affordable housing could be put at risk by the Healthy Buildings Ordinance and the requirements of that. So I'd like to make sure that that's considered before that passes. As far as one of the unfortunate things about the out-of-town consultants did such a bad job of Envision 2045 that staff had to come in and do the work for the second draft is that the strategic housing plan has been put on the back burner. And that's something that I really wanted to talk about. That's a plan where we talk about how to keep people in the housing that they have, whether you subsidize the individual or the family themselves or the landlord to make the economics work. It talks about how to slow gentrification and keep that diversity that Steve's been talking about. One of the projects in the third ward that I'm very excited about is the Lot 1 project. So that's on South Boulevard, right by the cemetery, right by the South Boulevard station. That is a true affordable housing project that's put on an underutilized city asset, and I'd like to see it repeated wherever it can be around the city and properties they own. That's 31 bedroom and 32 and 3 bedroom spots in a 5-story building on a parking lot that was underutilized, and the entire building is affordable housing.
Thank you. Candidate Kelly?
Thank you. I first want to address the inclusionary housing ordinance. So when a building is going up and say they're giving us a luxury building, 100 or 200 units, that building is being built. And it costs us nothing to have an inclusionary housing ordinance that mandates, say, 10%, or Mr. Kennedy said he'd like to see 20%. Why we would simply take the money and wait someday to maybe build affordable housing, maybe over by Howard on the west part of Evanston. No, the first ward needs this because we want integration in our city. And by the way, most places with their inclusionary housing ordinance, they mandate that it's in perpetuity. I think it's been bad that Evanston has had one that sunsets after 20 or 30 years. So what I assure you that next term I will bring this back and I will make sure that we have an inclusionary housing ordinance that mandates at least 10%, at least on site, with a certain percent of that set aside for our workforce, because we have so many workers here, staff that would love to live in Evanston but can't live here. And I'll tell you right now, much of the senior management supports that, so I look forward to bringing that forward. We also need to, I'm also a lead sponsor on a property tax circuit breaker program. That's to protect not just renters, but also homeowners. Homeowners need protection. And this is so that folks can age in place, long-term residents can remain where they are, and we help offset their property taxes. I'm very proud of this ordinance that's moving forward. Many council members had asked to sign on with me. I think 4 are co-sponsors with me. I'm the lead sponsor. We need to also invest in land trusts as a city, mixed income.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This will be the final question, and it will be answered first by Candidate Geer. The question is, what issues, specific or unique to your ward, need to be addressed by the council?
I think that the lakefront becomes quite an obvious one. We received a report about the dire condition of some of our beaches and lakefront parks, and that is going to take over $20 million over the course of a number of years to invest in infrastructure to fix that. I think that requires some immediate council action. I really do want us to invest in our lakefront. I'd love to see the passage of a lakefront protection ordinance that would put into city code that we won't commercialize the lakefront. I know that's in our master plan, but I want that even stronger, especially when we're talking about developing Evanston. I'd also like to see better investment in our parks and green space, more requirements for expanding parks and green space. We're talking about developing Chicago Avenue. We should also be talking about putting green space into those lots as developments go in. I know that a lot of those things will require some dedication of budget, but I know that there's also a lot of dedicated volunteers in the Third Ward who'd be more than happy to, for free, contribute to the maintenance of our parks, contribute to the maintenance of our tree canopy, and other elements of the natural landscape that makes the Third Ward such a delightful place to live.
Thank you. Candidate Hackney.
Thank you. I've centered my campaign on the economic renewal of downtown. And I recently had the pleasure of sitting with a gentleman who's in his 90s whose name is Bob Teska. And he is the founder of Teska and Associates, which is a terrific design firm headquartered here in Evanston. And he wrote a history of the efforts to revitalize our downtown that goes back 70 years to 1956, which was when Old Orchard was founded. That inaugurated a change in trajectory for Evanston's downtown, which up until that point had been known as the downtown of the North Side. We had 3 department stores, including a Marshall Field's. Now, ever since then, what Mr. Teska's book reveals is we have always been involved in a constant reanalysis and reassessment of our strategic plan for the downtown. We went through a phase where we pursued headquarters like the Rotary and others to have their headquarters in downtown, and that worked for a period until American manufacturing suffered and we lost them. What I would like to do, if elected, is start our next strategic planning initiative for downtown with the appointment of a committee. I would like the City Council to not be charged with the strategic planning for downtown because it's so difficult for it to get things done. I want a multidisciplinary committee that will report back to the mayor and the City Council that explains how we're going to win the next 50 years.
Thank you. Candidate Isles.
So on the Third Ward, we definitely need to talk about the lakefront. That is an asset for the entire city, but it's located in the Third Ward and the First Ward as well. And that shoreline stabilization project was a pretty shocking report. So we need to include that into our capital plans and prioritize the areas that are most in need. I also have been talking about a lakefront protection ordinance that would ensure the beaches are clean and beautiful and free and open for Evanstonians forever. I've been talking about that with my supporter, Cam Davis, who is Obama's Great Lakes czar and works at the Water Reclamation Commission. So that's something that we've been working on. I'm a big fan of nature-based shoreline solutions that minimize the hard structures that sometimes do as much damage as they mitigate. An example would be the dune management project at Lighthouse Beach that was a successful dune restoration that makes it more resilient and a speedier recovery. I also think in the Third Ward we have to talk about transit. If we're going to talk about transit adjacent development, we need to improve transit. And so it's kind of a chicken and the egg thing. We need people to get better transit, and we need transit to get more people. And so it goes round and round. But some of the things we can do is advocate for more ADA compliance in the stations. A lot of the stations along the Purple Line are not ADA compliant. We can also advocate for better
Thank
bus.
you. Candidate Kelly.
Thank you. So I'd say the 3 top focus for me on the First Ward are downtown, the lakefront, and creating affordability. And included in the comprehensive plan. So with regard to downtown, I have moved forward. I think as a city council, I hope we elect folks who really embrace our small businesses and understand that these small businesses really are the engine of our community. I fought hard when we received the COVID recovery money of $43 million. Most cities across the nation, the Treasury Department expected most cities to allocate anywhere from 8 to 12% of that fund towards our small businesses. I worked very hard. I wrote a huge paper on this in collaboration with the economic development director who did Andersonville. And I asked for $2 million. I could only get $250,000 out of the council to support the recovery and growth of our small businesses. This is essential for our town. I've recently, moved forward with an ordinance to support businesses as they expand and relocate. We want to incentivize them to stay in Evanston. So there's a lot. I think we also need to strengthen our public works department to ensure that downtown is maintained clean. I'm not in favor of outsourcing firms that come in to clean our downtown. I think we need to strengthen our public works department to have it have that in-house. And with regard to the lakefront ordinance, I actually have been working with Cam Davis. We are working on a lakefront protection ordinance, and we have together submitted language for the comprehensive plan that I expect to see included in there that would ensure.
Thank you. Candidate Kennedy?
So by far, the biggest issue in the third ward is Envision Evanston and the first proposal on putting 100-foot tall buildings up and down Chicago Avenue. Now that is probably off the table, but I'll make sure it stays off the table. This issue has gotten my neighbors and all of the third ward very, very involved. Now, with regard to Chicago Avenue, there will be development. But when it's developed, we have to provide, believe it or not, even though it's called transit-oriented development, and we're telling the developers, oh, you don't have to build so many parking spots, guess what? 65% of the 5,500 units we've built since 2000 have registered Illinois cars to them, up and down the main developments, which means any developer coming in here has to provide adequate parking. A big issue, especially south of Main for the third ward, is parking. Walking 2 to 3 blocks to find a spot for your car is not necessarily something we need to make worse by selling off our lots and, allowing developers to get scot-free because they'll make a little more money if they don't put in the parking.
Thank you. We will now move to your 1.5-minute closing statements, and we will begin with candidate Stephen Hackney. Mr. Hackney, you have 2 minutes.
2 minutes? Or?
I'm sorry, 1.5 minutes.
Okay, because it actually matters. So thank you.
Yes.
And thank you to the League for this. And thank you so much for your moderation. Thanks all of you for coming today. You're investing in your city. And I'm all of us, I'm sure, are deeply grateful for it. I'm running to represent the first ward because I think our city is at a crossroads. Our school-age population in the elementary schools is down 20%. Our downtown is suffering. Retail vacancies are at historic highs. Commercial office vacancies are at highs. There is very little housing stock, and that which we do have is not affordable. My daughter, Avra, is going to turn 16, I think, at some point this year. And if Avra goes off to college and meets a nice young woman and they settle down and have a kid or two and decide that they want to move back to Avra's hometown, where will they live? I think we need to do the things right now that set up the chance for my daughters to one day come back and live in Evanston just as they've grown up here with their own families. And I'm asking for your vote to help me do that. Now, I will say for the last 25 years, I've been a partner at Kirkland & Ellis, and I've focused on turning around companies that were failing so that they could succeed again. And I'm asking for your vote to let me do that with our downtown. Our downtown needs a turnaround. I'll close by saying I'm very proud of the endorsements that I've gained. I'm endorsed by every single living mayor of the city of Evanston, including the current one, Daniel Biss. I'm endorsed by the only member of the city council to make an endorsement in my race, Eleanor Ravel. And I'm also endorsed by the Sierra Club. I'd ask for your vote on April 1st. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Candidate Sean Isles.
Thank you for the opportunity, and thank you all for being here today. My family moved here almost 15 years ago, and we've never regretted it for a moment. I very quickly wanted to put down roots and embedded myself in the community. I'm an organizer of the Produce Mobile. I've coached your kids at AYSO. I've been president of the local Rotary Club. I've been president of the PTA at Lincoln School and run the Bookery program. I've gone through Leadership Evanston. I've gone through the Community Police Academy. And I served 3 terms on the library board, which is where I proved that I can be collaborative, responsive, transparent. I was a good public steward of your funds. But part of the reason I'm running is that we are at an inflection point, and that's true of many communities in America. We're struggling with affordability and we're struggling with homelessness. And I am the overnight shelter director at Interfaith Action of Evanston, and I see every day the consequences of those two things. And our diversity is at risk, our socioeconomic and our racial diversity. And so, I really think we're better and more resilient when we face challenges and make decisions together. So in my experience, I've learned to disagree productively. This is a community service for me, not a stepping stone to something else. And success in this role requires the ability to build consensus. And I've proven that I can do that in the roles that I've served.
Thank you. Candidate Claire Kelly.
Thank you. As a resident of over 50 years, I'm deeply entrenched in this unique and beautiful community. I think I have a long record that speaks for itself, both my record on council and my life's work as a retired teacher of 32 years and my very successful work as a community activist. I want to say Evanston is really a beautiful city, and the first ward, I will say, is particularly wonderful, encompassing the Lakefront Northwestern, our downtown, Noise Cultural Arts Center, and much more. During my term, I have worked very hard and effectively to bring forward many ordinances and many measures with every single member of the dais, of the council, partnering with me, that benefit all residents and our small businesses and our downtown to create a more inclusive and supportive first ward and city. Measures that need to be taken to increase affordable housing, as I've said, and these measures are not the ones that were currently being put forward with our Envision Evanston. Addressing the needs of our businesses and of our residents requires a firm and genuine commitment to our local businesses and to our residents that live here now. And I've worked very hard on this to the point where I've been elected at the National League of Cities to two committees. I'm an officer, I'm a vice chair of both the Finance Committee and the University Communities Council because of my hard work to establish relationships with Northwestern, and I initiated the finance budget, the Finance Committee, which we didn't have before. So I think that, Evanston residents and businesses understand that I am that council member that represents them. Thank you.
Candidate John Kennedy.
So we've talked a lot about issues today, right? Very important, very critical to make good decisions, but you're electing people for 4 years. And so the issues that will be in front of this council 3 years from now will be totally different than what we're talking here. So you're electing someone that has a vision. Let me tell you mine. I believe in a city that needs to be more responsive to their residents. They have to listen more. They have to be more helpful. I have heard stories walking through the third ward of the city ignoring legitimate requests by residents. That has to change. Second area, the city has to act in areas that we all believe are important. We've talked a lot about affordable housing. Great. We haven't talked about things like 13,000 lead pipe homes that need to be accelerated and removed. Those are the kind, but the third thing is the city needs to become more sustainable. And in doing that, they need to have a group of people that are working with residents to help them with their, transfer from natural gas to, some alternative that's green. So, but the key thing is to do any of that, we need to have the resources. And so the financial structure has to be sound, and that's what I'm running for.
Thank you. And finally, candidate Jennifer Gear.
Thank you all so much for having me. It's been really cool to be at a forum hosted by the League of Women Voters on International Women's Day, as I am seeking to represent a ward that has been represented by women since 1969. I mentioned that because I think our city's strength comes from our diversity and by expanding our participation in democracy. In this particular political climate, I'm running to be a champion for justice. And that's not just because it aligns with my values, but because it's part of who I am. And I'll give you a couple of examples of how that's manifested. I am Japanese American. English is not my first language. So when I went around to talk to business owners, I brought a translator with me so that I could understand their concerns. I was the only candidate to join our Starbucks workers on the picket line when they went on strike right before Christmas. And last year, I was a part of Democratic organizing to defeat Donald Trump and particularly to protect trans kids and offer resources for LGBTQ families. A lot of that's a little esoteric, but that is the ethos that I want to bring to our city council and something that I think that we can look forward to and be a shining example of, especially as a progressive city. So I hope I can earn your vote on April 1st, and I appreciate everyone taking the time to come out.
Thank you. I'd like to thank all of the candidates. You gave wonderful answers, and please let's give them a round of applause. I'd like to remind everyone that this forum is being recorded and will be available on the League website at LWVE.org until Election Day on April 1st. The League also has resources about candidates, so look at the League websites. They can be very informative. Don't forget to vote. This is very important, and I think it's redundant for the people here. Obviously, you're interested and engaged, and if you're watching this on playback, but make sure that you vote either early or on April 1st, and you can also vote by mail, but you need to have your request for a mail-in ballot in by March 17th. That's St. Patrick's Day, so before you go parading, get your interest in. Again, thank you all for coming. Thank you for your participation and interest. Thanks to all the candidates for your civic service and interest in civic service. And everyone, have a great day.